Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Ryan MacCarrigan, the founding principal of Lean Studio. Good afternoon, Ryan. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. So to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure, of course. So I have worked in tech for a little over a decade. The thing that I'm known for is my role and involvement with the Lean startup community. I got involved working with some early evangelists of the Lean startup movement, including Eric Ries. Before the book, The Lean Startup, was published, I was in New York, got very involved with that community and basically shaped my whole career around that movement. I've worked as the head of marketing at a couple of startups. I've been on the leadership of several startups. And prior to founding my consultancy, Lean Studio, I sort of bounced around between working for startups and working in communications before I really fell in love with the startup community and decided to carve out a career for myself there. Fast forward to today, my focus is on helping teams improve their product development, all through that lens of Lean startup. I also do a lot of work in corporate innovation training, usually around Lean startup as well. Outside of Lean Studio, I also do a couple other things. So I'm the global president of the Columbia Venture Community, which is the largest entrepreneurial community at Columbia University. So we have over 6,000 alumni. We've done over 500 events since our founding way back in 2006. And so that's sort of my other job. And then I also teach. So I'm part of the business faculty at INSECU, which is the largest higher private education group in France. There are 16 schools. And we have a campus in San Francisco that I've been teaching at for almost 6 years. I teach entrepreneurship, product design, some other related courses. So I am through and through a startup guy, and that's been my focus for more than a decade.
But other than those three, which sounded like almost full-time jobs, you really got nothing to do, right?
You know, I sit around just trying to figure out how can I keep myself busy all the time, and it's tough.
Yeah, I would imagine. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employee and an employer?
Great question. So the reason I actually jumped at the chance to do this was because I think my career exemplifies this new modality of remote work, and the fact that it's possible to be remote all the time. So the first job that I got after I graduated from college was working at a startup, an agency startup in New York called SourcePad, which was a development shop, but we also had some internal products that we were building and that I was part of the process of building. But that was a 100% remote setup. So the team in New York was 100% remote. Occasionally we would meet in person for social reasons, but most of our team was actually in Manila in the Philippines. And our core value proposition at SourcePad was actually that scrappy early stage startups should not have to spend a ton of money on development resources. And of course, you know how expensive that can get. So our team in Manila was, by and large, were people that had worked at Fortune 500 companies that had operations in the Philippines, who spoke great English, who culturally could interact with our clients very well, and we did that over Skype and over Google Drive. Our stack there, the same tools we use today, but much earlier than a lot of companies at the time were accustomed to. They were still sort of finding their sea legs with things like Skype and video conferencing. But that was how we managed everything and how we worked with all of our clients.
Interesting. So, I mean, since you actually mentor lean startups, or startups how to be lean, is this one of the things you recommend to them is to cut, development costs by outsourcing these types of jobs?
Yes. I mean, at the time, this was back 2009. It was readily available technology, but not everyone was taking advantage of it. I think that there was a stigma around being a scrappy business, managing everything remotely, when when it seems more professional to do everything in an office and to be in person. And we ran into a lot of resistance as part of our business development and sales process. We would run into companies that were looking to keep their development costs much lower. And they understood what our value proposition was, and they understood the value that we could provide, but sometimes they just still resisted. They wanted engineers on site, or they wanted to have at least more visibility into the work that was being done if they could be in the same city, or at least have a physical location. I think some of that was psychological. And looking back on it today, it almost seems ridiculous because everyone accepts that this modality is reality, whether we were forced into it or not. But yeah, that was my entree into remote work. It was a formative experience, and it's why I feel like ever since I've been a strong advocate for remote work.
Very cool. Yeah. And so, what do you think is going to be the future of it once COVID subside, which eventually will? Do you think that it's caught on enough now that people are like, yeah, this is great, or do you think people are going to go back to the old ways?
So I have a little bit of insight here. Over the summer, I led some innovation research for Epson, Seiko Epson Corp. Many companies like Epson that are hardware focused companies had, a freak out moment when all of this began, and we're like, wow, what are we going to do if people are not working in offices anymore? And so I actually did a big study, and we did a lot of qualitative research, like one-on-one interviews with people about their experience, not just through the lens of Epson products, but just in terms of what's the future of work. How do I see myself in a post-COVID world? Do I want to work remotely full-time? Is there a hybrid approach, or do we just return to normal like nothing happened? And overwhelmingly, the common thread there was that people desire a hybrid model. They miss social interaction, they miss collaboration, but they don't necessarily want to be on Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 schedule ever again. And I think all of us can agree that, that model was enforced for a long time just because it was kind of, the de facto model, and we didn't question it because we didn't question it. And
Right.
Those of us that did, we did for other reasons, like I mentioned, being scrappy, being more technology oriented. But bigger companies, corporations that now are confronted with this question of whether they should allow a hybrid model or not, because I think that's the key question. Will they allow this hybrid model? Will it be possible to work more from home, to do working vacations, to be able to have more time for childcare, things of that nature? Will they lean into that, or will they resist? I don't know the answer, but I can tell you that people want the hybrid model from the research that we did, and companies should listen to that.
I think actually if companies resist it and they don't allow it, they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage to acquire.
Absolutely.
Right. We both live in the San Francisco Bay Area. If I've had job offers in the city and I've turned them down because I lose 2 hours a day.
Yes.
It's really that simple. And I'm, you know what I'm talking about.
I have, I've commuted down to the South Bay. I had a role with SanDisk for a bit, and that commute was killer.
Yes.
And when you lose more than 2 hours of your day sitting in a car, I mean, when you begin to add up all of those lost hours, it really is sad.
It is. And I've personally been working from home for over 10 years, and I just don't think I could, and I don't have a problem with the hybrid model where it's like you go in from 10 to 2 or whatever, or
Right.
when needed, because then there's not traffic. And as you know, there's not much traffic in the Bay Area now. It's really big.
Right.
I mean, it's so easy to get to the East Bay now. It wasn't a year ago, right?
Right. No, I mean, the mad dash of the morning commute, I think some people love that routine. Most of us just really can't stomach it.
Yeah.
But if there is a hybrid model, and we have, in addition to all the asynchronous communication that happens in that remote modality, if you have the option to go in when you want, or you can set a schedule outside of those typical commute times, then there is no mad dash. Then it's sort of all distributed differently.
Yeah. You just do your work when you can.
Stress.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've touched on Lean Studio. You obviously mentor startups, but what are the particular things you mentor them in, and what would be like the biggest size company you would actually work with?
Sure. So I do a lot of mentorship. I've been a mentor for startup accelerators. I've been a mentor for a number of incubators and just various programs that I've worked with over the years. Lean Startup Machine. I've done some stuff with Techstars and other groups. I typically mentor around Lean Startup, big surprise, but more specifically, so there are kind of three pillars that we see with Lean Startup. These are practices that have been around long before the term Lean Startup was coined. And they're customer development, business model design, and Agile. So typically I'll kind of assess what the problem is that they need help with, and we'll triage something related to their customer discovery and validation process. How are they actually recruiting people to talk to? Have they done sufficient work to define their target audience, their persona, things of that nature? And then business model design, what is their vision for the business model? How are they going to test all of the building blocks of their business model? And Agile, of course, is a huge space in and of itself, which has to do with eliminating as much waste as possible, delivering as much value as we can to our customer in as short a time as possible, but without sacrificing quality. And so when you take all of this together, and some additional contributions from the Lean Startup community, like validated learning and innovation accounting and some other concepts, you have sort of this whole working theory of how early stage risk should be managed, and how we can still deliver a lot of high quality value to customers without or I should say deliver a lot of value without sacrificing quality. And so that's basically what I mentor around. Most of my work is coaching and consulting. I'm working with a few startups right now, and I'm also gearing up to do some more corporate innovation work. So I'm lucky to have a nice little mix of things that I work on.
Yes. So the current situation, I mean, we're all working from home now, and it all started in mid-March. It sounds like it really didn't have a big effect on you, but I have a feeling it did on some of your customers. Is that safe to assume?
So the biggest impact it had on me was I was very worried around March that some of my deal pipeline, some of the work that had been lined up would shrivel up, and it did. So I was working on an event with 500 startups that we had to cancel indefinitely. That was sort of like a training on how institutional investment works, and I was one of the organizers of that, and that was going to lead to some coaching opportunities and business opportunities. It didn't happen. But then on the other hand, I was working on a project with Unilever R&D, which is based out of Connecticut. And I was supposed to fly out to do some training and to facilitate some workshops over a week with their team at Unilever. And at first I was pretty depressed. I thought that was just going to fall through. I was really excited to work with that team. And ultimately we did pivot to remote. We were able to pull it off using a really great tool that I love called Mural. Mural is one of the online kind of digital whiteboard tools that's become very popular, and their competitor Miro. I'm not a spokesperson for Mural, but I really do love Mural. And so I was able to do that and pull it off successfully. So there was sort of that moment of like, oh crap, what's going to happen to all of these opportunities that, in many cases take months and months to line up. And most of it ended up happening, but pivoting to remote, thanks to this wonderful stack of tools that we have at our disposal. You lose the social part of it. It's also less experiential, but we can still make up for most of that.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you for your time today. It's always good to talk to someone, first of all, from the Bay Area, and two, that a believer in remote and a practitioner of remote. It's always a pleasure. You sounds like you have a lot of experience in this. And I want to wish Lean Studio lots of luck, and I'm sure you're going to do well.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. And I hope we all come out of this wiser and optimistic and hopeful that we can deal with this better if it ever happens again.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't, but you're right. If it
Yes.
does, we're ready. All right.
Yes.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Mark.